ke ulu, sidak si tahu kita pemburu. Sidak cemburu, tanda sidak sakit say I see you. Siknya senang nak senang sis, siknya susah nak susah bro. Siknya senang nak senang sis, siknya susah nak susah bro. Kita ke ulu, sidak si tahu kita pemburu. Sidak cemburu, tanda sidak sakit say I see you. Kita ke ulu, sidak si tahu kita pemburu. Sidak cemburu, tanda sidak sakit say I see you. Hustle.
Saksikan Hustle hasil setiap Sabtu dan Ahad 12.15 tengah hari hanya di TVS saluran 122 Astro dan My Freeview.
Transition to endemic phase in April. Abang Johari tested positive for COVID-19 and Malaysia remembers MH370 tragedy 8 years on. Those are the headlines for tonight. I'm Muhammad Yusuf and this is TVS Nightline. Good evening. Now, Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob have announced that Malaysia will be moving into the transition to endemic phase, a move that will automatically reopen the country's border effective April 1st. The decision, he said, was made after considering multiple factors including risk evaluation, insights from the Ministry of Health MOH and recommendations from the Quartet Minister.
Penting untuk saya maklumkan, fasa peralihan ke endemik ini merupakan exit strategi untuk membolehkan kita semua kembali semula kepada kehidupan yang hampir normal selepas hampir 2 tahun berperang dengan COVID-19.
The transition phase, he said, is a period where fellow Malaysians would get used to before the endemic phase, a decision subjected to the World Health Organization's WHO recommendations. On the reopening of the country's border, Ismail Sabri added, it will allow Malaysia's economy, especially the tourism industry, to spur as it was the most affected by the pandemic.
Dengan pembukaan semula sempadan negara ini, rakyat Malaysia yang mempunyai dokumen perjalanan yang sah kini boleh keluar masuk negara seperti biasa serta dibenarkan untuk pergi ke mana-mana negara yang turut membuka pintu sempadannya kepada pengembara luar. Dalam masa yang sama, rakyat luar negara dengan dokumen perjalanan yang sah juga boleh melakukan pergerakan keluar masuk ke Malaysia tanpa perlu lagi memohon My Travel Pass yang akan dimansuhkan.
Following the announcement, State Tourism, Creative Industry and Performing Arts Minister Datuk Seri ABDUL Karim Rahman Hamzah lauded the idea as a good move, saying the country could not afford to continue keeping its borders shut.
He said the same move has been implemented by several countries around the world, such as Australia and the Philippines, after being hit by the COVID-19 for 2 years. He remarked that the Sarawak government is one of the few state governments which had already worked out its post-COVID-19 development strategy in its continuous efforts to keep the state's development agenda on track in the long run. Adding that the move is much needed as people's livelihood is at stake and everyone needs to work hard to keep everyone's lives returning to normal. Meanwhile, National Recovery Council Chairman Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin said the move bodes well for Malaysia's recovery process, especially for badly affected sectors such as the tourism and commercial industries. He noted that Malaysia plays an important role in the global supply chain and the prolonged closing of borders would affect Malaysia's standing and competitiveness at the international trade level.
As Malaysia slowly eases into the transition to the endemic phase beginning April 1st, Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob announced further relaxations of the SOPs, among which there will be no more limit on congregational prayers in all mosques and suraus, as well as other houses of worship.
The Prime Minister said the final standard operating procedures for the matter are subject to the decision of the respective religious authority in the state. However, he said it is just a recommendation from the federal government and it is up to the state government to make the final decision. Meanwhile, the SOP for mass prayers in non-Muslim houses of worship would be subject to the decision of the Ministry of National Unity and its unit for other religions, UNIFOR. Limits on the number of employees allowed in the workplace will also no longer be applicable. In addition, business premises are no longer subjected to restricted business operating hours, which means that businesses that were operating for 24 hours before, such as restaurants and convenience stores, can revert back to the old business hours again. On the border front, fully vaccinated individuals need no longer undergo quarantine, but visitors intending to enter the country must undergo an RT-PCR test 2 days before departure and an RTK-AG test within 24 hours upon arrival. The required My Travel Pass will be abolished, but visitors to the country will still need to download and use the MySejahtera app upon arrival. Nevertheless, face mask requirements are still mandatory, and those tested positive for COVID-19 will still need to abide by the Health Ministry's existing guidelines and SOPs.
March 8th, International Women's Day, with the theme Break the Bias, is a global day of celebration to celebrate the cultural, political and socio-economical achievements of women and girls. This year's celebration takes place against the backdrop of the ongoing global pandemic and emerging new strains. Nevertheless, it is important to note that women are breaking barriers and achieving the impossible every single day. And to commemorate the day, we've asked few successful working women to share their insights. Let's take a look.
Becoming the first female colorectal surgeon in Sarawak certainly tough and warrants strong will to do so. But I believe for any woman out there, and especially for young doctors who wanted to do the same, anything is possible. For me, I believe that empowering and training the young doctors to do the same and also to succeed in their career is certainly vital.
Meanwhile, Esther Law, founder and chairlady of YAS Group, believes that to empower others, we must first lead by example.
I'm a strong believer that each and every one of us should lead by example. Lead with hearts is my life formula. I lead by hugging, inclusivity. I hug people into my life. The second keyword is E. I encourage myself all the time before I can encourage others. Positive mindset is important. A. Appreciate. I appreciate myself first before I can appreciate others. Therefore, I must take care of myself well before I can take care of other people. And that R is reach out. Reach out means I learn, I do, I share. That is the formula of reaching out. I do believe lead my life through touching people's life, as many as we can. Through the S, sincerity. Lead with hearts. My life formula.
At the same time, gender bias against women remains significant to this day, and Shana Sabri, the founder of Prodigy, is of the opinion that women should find their own achievement and satisfaction of success despite their generation's trajectory.
Today is a beautiful moment for us to reflect and to celebrate women empowerment globally. Together, we can contribute in support of women's rights economically, politically, socially, and culturally. This year's theme is Break the Bias Against Women at the Workplace, at home, and in school. For us to achieve this, we must break the biases that have become a standard practice.
Meanwhile, Sarah Nadia, an entrepreneur, shared her difficult journey in which she eventually became victorious.
I felt my first true success when all the hard work our team put into were realized. I felt it again when we formed our beauty care business and our brands were recognized. But all that came with a price. We went through a lot of pain, a lot of tears, a lot of hardships. But those are all learning curves that we have to forego to get to the destination that we want to be. I have always been intrigued by the quote, "Here's to strong women. May we know them, may we be them, may we raise them." Firstly, I'd like to wish all mothers, sisters, daughters, and my girlfriends and colleagues a momentous International Women's Day.
So to all the women out there, speak up, create your path to your own goals and happiness. Speak up. Your voice needs to be heard in a true authentic expression. Break the bias. Happy International Women's Day.
To all women worldwide, I wish you a happy International Women's Day. Together, we break the bias.
For all the women out there in Sarawak especially, Happy International Women's Day 2022. Believe that you can. Thank you.
Right, on to the next news. The Premier of Sarawak apologized for his absence at the state-level Women's Day held in Miri this morning after he was tested positive for COVID-19. The matter was initially confirmed by Minister of Women, Childhood and Community Wellbeing Development, Datuk Sri Fatimah Abdullah, who was representing Datuk Patinggi Tan Sri Abang Johari Tun Openg at the event. According to an official statement from the Office of the Premier of Sarawak, Abang Johari had developed mild symptoms since Monday, March 7 and is currently undergoing home quarantine for 5 days.
Saya ingin menyampaikan salam kemaafan daripada Yang Amat Berhormat Tan Sri Datuk Patinggi Dr. Abang Haji Abdul Rahman, Premier Sarawak. Kami menerima berita pada jam 9 malam tadi bahawa beliau tidak dapat hadir untuk merasmikan majlis kita pada pagi ini kerana beliau telah disahkan positif COVID-19.
Fatimah apologized on behalf of the Premier of Sarawak for not being able to attend and officiate a ceremony scheduled this morning. Fatimah said this in her speech during the Sarawak Women's Day 2022 celebration. In the meantime, she also took the opportunity to call upon the public to pray for Abang Johari's speedy recovery.
The recent outbreak of the African swine fever, or ASF, in Sarawak has been an unprecedented and a challenge to the state's swine industry. ASF is responsible for the significant reduction in the state's swine population due to culling, a measure taken to contain the spread of the disease, resulting in huge financial losses for the industry.
Because this one, the moment any of the pig got infected, we have to do culling. So it is something very frustrating to see what to do. And the department of the veterinary department of Sarawak is trying their level best to see how best we can in future to protect this from happening.
The Veterinary Services Department TVS Sarawak has been instructed to look into the matter and find measures to prevent it from happening in the future. If left unattended, it could lead to economic losses to local pig farmers and impact food security. He said this when met by reporters on Tuesday. Rooney pointed out that ASF is highly virulent and contagious viral disease affecting only pigs, and the affected pig carcasses must be buried to prevent the spread of the virus to other pig farms. Nonetheless, Dr. Rundi assured that the pig farming area at Pasir Puteh in Simunjan is safe and free from the disease and are still being exported to Singapore.
Anda nak tahu apa yang terjadi dalam sejahtera Asia musim yang terbaru?
Lebih rancak, lebih meriah,
lebih menarik, lebih informatif, lebih banyak program baharu dan menarik.
Nak belajar? Nak tahu tempat menarik? Nak apa lagi?
Saya di sini lagi rancak berjalan. Saksikan Sejahtera Asia musim yang baru bersiaran setiap hari jam 7.30 pagi.
Remarkable Living returns with a new season.
Tarian lah sebenarnya.
Welcome back. Now, the federal government is urged to come up with a new approach to maximize the development of Sabah and Sarawak. This has been called out by the Sabah's Deputy Chief Minister, Datuk Seri Bung Mokhtar Radin, where only about 38% of the allocation were used each year, and that the open tender system takes a long time to be implemented, causing irrelevancy to its practice in both states.
The Kinabatangan Member of Parliament explained that the open tender program will take about 3 to 6 months, followed by a design phase, which would take over a year. Projects would only begin in 3.5 years, and this has caused many projects to develop in a very slow manner, which caused Sabah to not fully utilize its 5 billion ringgit allocation from the federal government. Under Budget 2022 tabled by Finance Minister Tengku Datuk Seri Zafrul Tengku Abdul Aziz, 5.2 billion ringgit was allocated to Sabah, while 4.6 billion ringgit was allocated for Sarawak's development. The matter, Bung Mokhtar said, should be addressed immediately as both East Malaysian states have been left far behind in terms of development.
Today's date, the 8th of March, marks the 8th anniversary of the mysterious disappearance of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370, which went missing from the Beijing-bound flight from Kuala Lumpur. To this day, the disappearance remains one of the world's biggest mystery, leaving the whole world clueless. Former Director General of the Malaysian Civil Aviation Department, or DCA, Datuk Seri AZHARUDDIN Abdul Rahman, said the early hours of March 8, 2014 still haunts him to this date.
8 years have passed, yet many questions on the mysterious disappearance of MH370 are still left unanswered. Families of the 239 flight crew and passengers of the missing aircraft are still waiting for an answer to their tragic losses. The discovery of debris near the waters southwest of the African coast, believed to be from MH370's wings and fuselage, raises questions on how the aircraft could deviate far from its original intended course. Sharing his experience of handling the largest tragedy in the history of aviation, AZHARUDDIN said the loss of MH370 was a bitter experience and the memory still scared him to this date.
Pada awal pagi 8 Mac 2014, sebab saya bangun pagi untuk solat dan saya dapati dari telefon saya banyaklah miss call dan juga message dan semuanya mengatakan bahawa kehilangan pesawat, macam mana boleh hilang dan inilah, dan saya tak dapat untuk baca semuanya, baca apa daripada pegawai saya yang mengatakan bahawa kita telah hilang satu pesawat MH300 Boeing 77 yang terbang daripada KLIA ke Beijing. Sepatutnya pagi itu pergi kenduri kahwin anak saya. Jadi tak dapatlah. Sebabnya saya rasa ini pada baca semua tu, saya rasa ini ada satu insiden yang amat besar. Yang lain pada lain. Dan saya bergegas mandi, siap minum segelas kopi dan terus pergi ke Sama-Sama Hotel. Sebabnya saya perlu ada di Sama-Sama Hotel untuk sidang akhbar yang pertama.
AZHARUDDIN said the first press conference at Sama-Sama Hotel on March 8, 2014 is still fresh in his memories, with hundreds of officials and media gathered at the hotel's auditorium.
Bila kita masuk sahaja Dewan Auditorium Sama-Sama Hotel tu, berderau jugalah di rumah. Bukannya berpuluh orang media, beratus dengan kamera berpuluh klik, kita pun berpindau lah. Apa nak ingat apa yang kita bagi tahu lagi, apa terjadi kepada pesawat tersebut. Memang tak tahulah, memang nak katakan terapung ke macam mimpi pun ada je.
Various conspiracy theories flooded the web, claiming to know the reason behind the missing aircraft MH370. Multiple efforts and theories have been presented to track the Malaysian aircraft, but to this day, to no avail. The last words of the captain of Malaysian Airlines flight MH370, Captain Zahari Ahmakir Shah, saying goodnight Malaysian 370, are still clear in the mind of Datuk Seri AZHARUDDIN Abdul Rahman, as it was the last known communication coming from the missing plane. Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 disappeared from radar on March 8, 2014, while on a scheduled flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, China, with 239 passengers on board.
National shuttlers duo Aaron Chia and Soh Woo Yi were forced to withdraw from participating in the German Open Championship set to take place from March 8 to March 13, following their teammate Woo Yi, who contracted the COVID-19 virus. The news caused great concern among fans, but was relieved after the Badminton Association Malaysia BAM stated that the player was asymptomatic and in good condition. According to BAM, Woo Yi is currently in isolation following all the standard operating procedures set by the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Youth and Sports, and the protocols set by the National Sports Council. Meanwhile, BAM Singles Coaching Director Wong Chung-han has verified that Ng Ze-yong will not be participating in the German Open due to minor injury. Ze-yong, who ranks 46th globally, was scheduled for a match with world number 6 Jonathan Christie from Indonesia for the opening round of the championship. Those who are still participating for the German Open are Ong Yu-sin, Teo Yi, Tan Wee-kyung, Tan Kian-meng, Goh Tze-fei, Nur Izzuddin Rumsani, and Man Wei-chong, T. Kai-woon.
Nak tahu saya masak apa? Jangan lupa saksikan saya Fatah Bowl di Cooking on a Bujang setiap Selasa jam 10.15 pagi hanya di TVS saluran 122 Astro dan My Preview. Jumpa nanti.
Mun mau tahu sini Siti makan minggu tak? Jangan lupa saksikan kami Siti Zawawi setiap hari Selasa pada jam 6.15 petang hanya di TVS saluran 122 Astro dan My Preview. Makan-makan!
TVS membawakan kepada
Welcome back. Now, due to its war on Ukraine, Russia has become the world's most sanctioned country, subjected to 2,777 new sanctions in just under 2 weeks since Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered troops into Ukraine. This brings the total to 5,532, according to the Global Sanctions Monitoring Database. In comparison, Iran has faced 3,616 sanctions, followed by Syria and North Korea with 2,608 and 2,077 sanctions respectively. Venezuela with 651 sanctions, Myanmar with 510 sanctions, and Cuba with 208 sanctions are among the list of the countries most sanctioned in the world. The country with the most sanctions against Moscow is Switzerland with 568. It is followed by the European Union with 518 sanctions, France with 512 sanctions, Canada with 454 sanctions, and Australia with 413 sanctions. The US has imposed 243 sanctions against Russia so far. The sanctions include 2,427 individuals, 343 organizations, 6 ships, and 2 aircrafts. Putin said on Saturday that Western sanctions against Russia were akin to a declaration of war. Russia's war on Ukraine, which began February 24th, has drawn international condemnation, led to financial sanctions on Moscow, and spurred an exodus of global firms from Russia. The West has also imposed binding export restrictions on key technologies that are now prohibited from being sent to Russia. Meanwhile, at least 406 civilians have been killed and 801 others injured in Ukraine since the beginning of the war, according to UN figures. However, the international body has maintained that conditions on the ground have made it difficult to verify the true number of civilian casualties. More than 1.7 million people have also fled to neighboring countries. Wrapping up the Nightline, 2 foreign fighters have volunteered to join Ukrainian armed forces in defending the country against Russian assault. Footage distributed in the Ukrainian Armed Forces press service on Monday showed the duo from Mexico and United Kingdom being deployed with Ukrainian soldiers in trenches in the Kiev region.
Я виріс в цій області. І тільки почалась війна, одразу пішов до військкомату. Бо я прослужив коло 10 років змішаного стажу. А якби тут живуть мої діти, мої батьки, і я не можу сидіти вдома, чи в теробороні, чи ще десь. Одразу пішов на війська захищати свою батьківщину до останньої каплі крові. Вони б'ються за гроші, не знаю, за якісь ідеї, якихось ненормальних людей, спотворені, деморалізовані, якісь, не знаю, події відбуваються. У нас, ми вдома, ми захищаємо свій дім, свою хату, своїх дітей, своїх батьків. Нам нема куди тікати.
Москаль прийшов до мене додому. У мене 2 дітей, батько, дід, баба, всі горбати на цій землі. Я не можу сидіти вдома, коли, будемо так казати, наша держава, в якій я родився, в опасності. За цього я тут.
Right. I'm fighting for democracy because democracy is precious and one man shouldn't decide that another country shouldn't have it.
Last week, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said 16,000 foreigners had volunteered to fight for the country. Ukraine has formed an international legion to accommodate the foreign volunteers. Ukrainian forces are seeking international reinforcement after Russian forces on Friday surrounded and bombarded several cities in the second week of an invasion launched by Putin.
And that's all the time we have for tonight's TVS Nightline as usual. Don't forget to follow us on our social media on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and of course, YouTube at TVSTVMY. Once again, I'm Muhammad Yusuf. Good night.